Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Let's Remember Suikoden 3. We've been making our way through Hugo's chapter. We have just ran away from Vinay Del Zexe because they were going to try and hold us hostage in exchange for soldiers that had been captured in the erupting conflict between the Grasslanders and the Zexen. We are on our way back home. We all, assuming that everybody has watched the rest of the series, know that what awaits us is not good. And so, seeing things from Hugo's perspective, after spending time at the beginning of his chapter in that space, even combining that with the time spent in Karya clan space as ghetto, we really get to see, it's not as if if we had just played Chris's chapter that we would find everything unsettling, but everything is even more unsettling because we have a larger context for everything that's happened. There's the tactical reason why the village was attacked, and then there's the manipulations that cause Boris to slaughter innocent people. And so I've talked almost really at length about this notion of the game setting up sort of an idealistic, sort of traditional opening to an RPG, heading out on a quest, going into the city. Sure, it's complicated a little bit by politics, but it's not that complicated. And then by the time we are done in that space, politics start to creep in and start to make the situation both uncomfortable and sort of not properly comprehensible, at least if we're looking at this just from Hugo's point of view. We know that there's been some sort of conflict, although we're not really willing to believe it, and it's affecting a lot of what's going on. And we can already see, all right, go past the border to the checkpoint to the whatever, the tension is there, and it's just this whole thing where you left on what was ostensibly a very simple task. Send a message to these people at the council and go from there. And you had to run away from the city because soldiers were trying to arrest you, based on something that you had no knowledge of nor involvement with. You know. And in messing with that notion of, well, this is the ideal story, it starts to flip things a lot on their heads. And it starts to really do that when Leo and Percival come for you in the inn in Vinay Del Zexe, and then it just builds really high until the Karya incident. This is just a scene, this is just you could see that this might be something that's made into something else later on, but it's just it's oh shit, we have to run. It's so weird. Certainly there have been plenty of RPGs where you're a fugitive for a crime you didn't commit. It's harder for me to think of RPGs or games where you are being pursued because of, political causes that absolutely were not your fault. It's one thing to play as a character who has been framed for a crime. That happens all the time. But to play as a character who people want to take hostage because they are the son of a clan that has just apparently gone to war and disrupted peace negotiations, that's a different take on a familiar story beat. So, hiding from people and being oh, no, it wasn't me, I'm not involved, that is all stuff that we're familiar with. But this is putting it into a more political and a different context, so that what we see here, besides a duck lying on two kids in a chimney, which is, again, another sentence never thought I would say in my life. But what we see in this game is that if it's not outright altering or subverting, at least with Hugo's chapter, JRPG ideas by presenting them in a not weirder, but a non-traditional context, a highly politicized context, then what it's at least doing is taking images and tropes that we might recall, sort of semiotically, that point to ideas and concepts that we already have, and sort of tweaking those concepts, right? And it's almost the reversed strategy of Skies of Arcadia. Skies of Arcadia did it through broadness, right? It painted very broad, and then basically just inverted things. Here, the game in Hugo's chapter, to an extent, paints broadly, but the nuance is already present. And what's really happening is that the situations, the standard situations, if you look at them on a broad level, haven't really changed. It's, people are fighting in war, this versus this. What happens instead is that there's just more time given to understanding the reasoning behind people's behaviors, right? Skies of Arcadia didn't do that. Like, people were good or they were evil. And that's fine. It provided a certain important shorthand for expressing sort of points about certain concepts and ideas, excuse me. Look at these things. That is scary. Megawaki A and B. Ooh, let's fight them. What Suikoden 3 is doing, and what most of the games in the series do, is that they take familiar concepts and instead just provide greater context for them. So they concern themselves with the why, right? So let me try and phrase this in a way that probably sounds silly, but should get the point across maybe a little bit. So if Skies of Arcadia is a game that's concerned with sort of the broader what, like what makes a hero, and what is audacious behavior, what is bravery, what is evil, what is empathetic, then the Suikoden series, and Suikoden 3 in particular, is all about why. Why is somebody perceived as a hero? Why is somebody perceived as a villain? Why does somebody go to war? Why does somebody want to start war? All of these things, right? A lot of games concern themselves with what? They concern themselves with sort of general ideas. Suikoden wants to personalize those things as we've come to understand them in JRPGs, or in, to a certain extent, general war narratives. And it wants to ask, why is this happening? And not in like a political thriller type way, not in a like weird bullshit Tom Clancy, like, this is why, like, oh, the Russians did this, which then led to this. It's like, no, this is like the human reason why somebody would fight for their nation. This is the human reason why somebody might want to send two nations into war. When we come to understand the villain's plot and why it is taking place, it's not something we condone, but it is something that we understand, right? And I think that's the difference, or at least that's something important that's being expressed here in this game and this game series, which is why it's such a big bummer that there's not been more of the series. I can let these ones go. Good. This is a series that's pretty ripe for this day and age, in the sense that millennials and obviously the Generation X and everything older folk. I say as if they're old. They're not really that old, but at least for me as an American, and this extends worldwide. I believe to certain extents, right? The start of the 21st century was really, really rocky and fraught with these strange political complexes that we didn't necessarily understand, nor did we properly respect them. This is something seen most directly in the Iraq War. Not that I feel qualified to talk too much about politics, but I can talk about broad human emotions, I think, because I am a human and I have emotions. The zeitgeist of the start of the 21st century, and we're just breaking out of it. In America, it was a lot of confusion. It was a lot of confusion about why, we never had a brush with radicalism in the way that we had, not to that great of an extent, like we did in September 11th, and that led to gross, and I mean that both in terms of scale and in terms of kind, gross mischaracterizations of peoples who we don't have as much representation of in America, right? So I'm not reading this as allegorical for anything that's occurring at the time, because this is pre 9/11 when this game's made, and I don't think that the game would be really wanting to comment on it anyway, but I do see the value in a nuanced war narrative in a not just like a post 9/11 world, but in the geopolitical sort of world that we inhabit now. Even a fantasy story about war that treats war with nuance has immense value, right? And we're not seeing RPGs do that as much right now. Our RPGs tend to be pretty broad. They're still pretty good. Dragon Age Inquisition is really broad, although it does do some politicking stuff with Orlais. But it's all about fighting larger sort of cosmic forces. What I would love is to see this series return, and to see a return to games that talk about conflicts in terms of the why. In terms of the why do we fight, right? And that sounds like a weird question, but not even like in the positive way, not like what do you have in your heart that drives you to fight? Like what do you fight for, right? Because that's like the weird patriotic version of it. But I think we need games that ask us, and they can be violent games, they can be non-violent games. I don't care about how they ask us it. But we should have games that ask us, why do we fight each other? What do we stand to gain as a species, as a large group of people inhabiting one Earth by fighting each other? And then in order to answer that question, the general assumption that I have is that we stand to gain nothing from fighting each other, and I think most people would agree. But in having narratives that want to focus on why conflict exists or how conflict can arise, there's never been a better time to be asking those questions, because we're long since past the mindset of war as this patriotic like thing. God, I wish I had the language for it. I want more games that make us ask, why the fuck are we fighting? And the Suikoden series, although they would be doing it via allegory, right, or thematic value that we then project onto the real world somehow, which the way I'm phrasing it sounds really recursive, but it's not. If we need a lot more games that ask us, like, what the fuck are we doing? Why are we fighting? How do we fight? How does conflict come about? Conflict is this thing that we have tons of in our games, and very often it's given very little contextualizing, because to over contextualize it is to personalize it too much. And in personalizing it, we can't make it as fun, right? Because games often want to be about fun. I'm having a great time playing Suikoden 3 right now, but I'm about to walk into a scene where I'm about to see my actor's best friend get killed by another one of the controllable actors that I had. That's some heavy shit. Maybe not, you know, I need to sit down and contemplate it for the rest of my life heavy shit, you know, not right, but enough for me to sit back and ask myself, what is happening in this scene, right? Chris is here, right, and we've sort of experienced it before, and we get to see, you know, we get to see it from this perspective, and the context has changed again. The images are the same, but the context has changed again. That's our friend. That's our friend that we've just been adventuring with for the last, I don't know, 2.5 hours, right? Maybe you don't empathize with Lulu that much. Maybe that's a fault of the writing, but it's a character that you've been playing as, and he rushes forth against a character that we had previously been playing as, and he dies. He gets slashed the fuck down, and that's terrible, right? And it sounds so funny for me to have to put that down there and be like, and that's terrible, but it is. And in showing that, Suikoden 3 and the series in general isn't afraid to provide us with a nuanced look at war that doesn't provide us with easy answers about why conflict arises, or give us cleaned up ideas about, you know, one side being good or one side being bad. It gives us something nuanced, and it gives us something nuanced in a world where, like, this scene is fucking bullshit. Like, I'm upset that it happens, for numerous reasons. I think it's a really effective scene, and yet, like, there's a giant duck and a fucking griffin here. Like, I should be sitting back and saying to myself, like, this is ridiculous. Why do I care? There's a duck and a griffin and all this bullshit. But, like, no, this matters, and it matters because it takes the time to make us care, right? It takes the time to, right? So, like, here's the question. Here's the fucking question. Why did this have to happen? And in the context of the scene, Hugo's talking about, you know, why is the fighting happening, but he's also talking about, why did his friend have to die? Why did all this have to happen? And this is the question that the game wants to sort of ask us and have us examine. And it's doing it in this broad fantasy context, but that doesn't make the question any less valid. Why? I demand to know why. I demand to know why in the real world. And nobody's been able to provide a satisfactory answer because there isn't a satisfactory answer. The reason why is because we do. Because we don't listen to each other. Because there are moments, there are millions of little moments where we could have done something different, but we didn't, and it leads to absolute chaos. And in the world that we live in now, a world that's incredibly fragile, yet a world that we can communicate with people almost instantly, these questions of why are incredibly important. So I truly lament the lack of this series in this current console generation, or the last console generation. Some games want us to ask questions. They do so incompletely. I think we could do with some RPG narratives again that really make us ask questions about war. There are probably plenty out there. I just can't think of any right now because I'm caught up in the moment and I'm talking extempore and probably talking poorly. But this is This text, I mean, this is not something where I need to sit back and like, I don't have an emotional connection to this text the same way I do Skies of Arcadia. But when I approach a situation like this and the game is doing all of these things, and I have to go off on my journey and then come back to my hometown, and my hometown is burnt down and my friend is killed and we're digging graves. Like, I have to ask myself, like, what is happening? Why is this game important to me? Why do I want to play it and talk about it? And it's because it's a game that wants me to ask questions. And sometimes art doesn't want you to ask questions. Sometimes art wants you to leave it the fuck alone. But this game invites questions. And that, I think some of the best art is art that openly invites questions. Perhaps the only thing that has come close and done a satisfactory job of dealing with war from a sort of I wish I knew the word I was looking for. I'm losing it. But I think the title that has, or the series and titles that have done the best about it, has been Valkyria Chronicles. That game, like, it's fun to play. It's strategy combat, and it's really good strategy combat. Those games have a lot to say about ethnic groups. It has a lot to say about some really unpleasant stuff that happens in war. And I don't know how many games we have that are really doing that. Listen, like, this is a bad example, but it's like, I like Grand Theft Auto, but Grand Theft Auto doesn't make me question anything. It's fun to play. But do I question anything? No, the text doesn't make me question anything. I might question things myself, but a lot of plenty popular games, like, what does, let's talk about the big dogs. What does Call of Duty make me question? Call of Duty doesn't make me question very much, other than why is there another Call of Duty game? Advanced Warfare had a little bit of commentary to say about the danger of private military corporations, but that's it. And yet now here I'm playing a title from the PlayStation 2, and my main character has seen his friend cut down, is like dealing with the notion of impermanence of his friend. His friend was just with him yesterday, and now his friend is gone. His friend is fucking dead. And I say that, you have to understand, whenever I use fucking, it's just an adjective to stress the importance of something I'm saying. I swear like a sailor. But it's important to have that stress be made. And Hugo's saying, like, I could have protected him. I could have done this. And Sergeant Joe says, what makes you think you can protect anyone? You are skilled at hunting. What happened here is war. It is childish to presume such invincibility. Right? We see things in the news every day, about people dying, about people fighting in wars. Worse yet, we forget the wars that are being fought by the people who are fighting them. And our entertainment, sometimes entertainment can just be escapism. Sometimes entertainment just needs to be escapism. But sometimes entertainment can be something more. It can entertain, but it can challenge, right? Right now, Suikoden 3 is, it's challenging me to understand war, to understand acts of violence, right? To understand why these things are happening. Again, why? Why is it happening, right? And Sergeant Joe sounds like he's being really harsh, but he's saying, listen, if you draw your blade and you fight in war, it's like, you are There's no excuse, Hugo. Like, this is what's going to happen. You fight or you die. And it's fucking sad. It's fucking sad because it's true. It's true. And the worst thing about it is, in the context of this game, and even in the context of the real world, very often, ever so often, men and women fight and die, and they fight and die on a lie. Right? So if Chris's chapter is telling me about, well, this is how somebody can engage in violence. Hugo's chapter is asking me to say, okay, now I understand that people can, but now I need to ask why people do it. It's a hard fucking question. So, on that weird ranty note, we are just at the end of our time, and that is Hugo's first chapter. Think of the contrast. Think of the contrast we had at the beginning of the chapter and where we end up. The game's doing something. Maybe it's not doing it perfectly, but it is doing something. And that's so much better, because there are games out there that so desperately want to do something, and so desperately want to say something. And yet this game says something with almost without even trying. It just presents its narrative. It doesn't have to do any weird tricks. It really doesn't. It just needs to have a strong script. And yeah, there's still stuff happening ludically, but really when you get down to it, it's the same RPG systems that you've had before. Everything's just being contextualized in a different way, and the game is asking you to question why things are happening the way that they're happening. Plenty of games want to say something. Plenty of games are not shy about the fact that they want to say something. Suikoden 3 doesn't want to say something. It has something to say. And that sounds like weird semantic garbage, but it makes all the difference in the world. So, that's it. Thank you for watching. I'm pretty sure I will continue with the rest of the game. This will be a long series. There will be times where I will do level grinding and other stuff off stage, off screen. I said off stage because I'm used to theater. But we'll get through it. I think there's still plenty of stuff for us to discuss. Thank you very much for watching. If you got this far, you are one of my heroes. Leave a comment. Let's talk about this. I unloaded there, and I don't know how cogent my point was, so let's just really go for it. Let's talk, right? The game's asking us a question. Let's try and find an answer. And let's try and keep finding answers as we play through the rest of the game. I will see you around. I love you very much. Bye.